Greetings! This is Griff Ruby, the Nostalgia Catholic, with yet another Isaac Asimov short story review. You will notice, however, that what we have here is not a magazine, but in fact a hardcover book, as the first place that this particular story of his met its reading public. It was a first for him, a story written specifically not for any science fiction or other magazine, but to go into a book, an anthology of various stories by various authors. And you can see on here, okay, I'll just read what you got here. It is a collection of new stories written expressly for this book by Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, Reginald Retnor, Anthony Boucher, Cleve Cartmill, Frank Fenton, Gerald Hurd, P. Schuyler Miller, okay, Chris Neville, A.E. Van Vogt, and Joseph Petrarca. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And there's, you see, New Tales in Space and Time, edited by Raymond Healy. And he's the one who kind of put together. Also, Anthony Boucher, who was the editor of the still then fairly new fantasy and science fiction magazine, was brought in to write the introduction as well as one of the stories. So, that's kind of an unusual thing that had never happened before, that you should get a story published in an anthology. So, what does it have to say about it? So the inside flap has a little bit of material about this stories. Okay. For several important reasons, the publication of this anthology marks a new and exciting development in science fiction. All of the stories in this collection were written especially for it, and none of these stories have ever appeared in print before. Many of this country's most talented and most popular science fiction craftsmen have contributed their best writing to this collection. The theme of each story is a positive one, whether it be time travel, interstellar and interplanetary voyagings, cybernetics, robots, parapsychology, political science, alien life, or communications, and each story is in direct contrast to much of today's science fiction, in that each stresses man's ability and desire to use his equipment and substance, both mental and physical, to better the world and its peoples. Edited by an outstanding science fiction anthologist, Raymond J. Healy, and introduced by the well-known science fiction expert Anthony Boucher, New Tales of Space and Time proudly presents these top-drawer writers. Ray Bradbury, okay, Here There Be Tigers, that story makes its first meeting of the public of this book, believe it or not. Okay, he tells us an expert and exciting story of interstellar travel. Okay, Isaac Asimov, which is what I'm going to be concerned with. This, in a good cause, he has conceived a wonderfully ironic plot for his intriguing study of the philosophy of revolution. Frank Fenton and Joseph Petrarca in Toller's Travel. Okay, Chris Neville, it goes through all these different people, little thumbnail descriptions of all the different stories, since we are really concerned only with Isaac Asimov, so we stop there. And so, this book came out, and as you can see, the first edition, copyright 1951, by Henry Holt and Company Incorporated. All rights reserved, including the right to reproduce this book or portions thereof in any form. First edition, printed in the United States of America. This book is from Midge and David. Acknowledgements. The editor wishes to express warm gratitude to the many friends and associates who helped him in the preparation of this book. Special thanks are due to Paul Kirby, who insisted on a positive attitude by the editor, as well as the contributors to Anthony Boucher and J. Francis McComas for invaluable advice and assistance, to Forrest Ackerman, to Ken Crossan for keeping a secret, and finally to my young friend Brett McKinley for 4 or 5 years patient prodding. Forrest Ackerman, that is a figure in science fiction. clearly somebody who had truly the very most masterful collection of science fiction publications of probably anybody that ever lived. So I have to marvel at how thorough his collection was. In fact, when Isaac Asimov had discovered that his old story, The Weapon, hadn't in fact been lost but was published under a different name, and it was in a certain magazine, Forrest Ackerman said, well, I got a spare of that, and he provided it to him. When Isaac Asimov, he would just slice out his own stories, to save space from all these magazines, but at some point I kind of thought, it would be kind of neat to have the very first magazine. Forrest J. Ackerman was able to provide him with one. Here you go, Isaac, just friend, here you go. So, what is in a good cause? Well, obviously, as it says, it has something to do with the whole idea of revolution. So, let's look at our situation. There's humanity with all of its faults and foibles and capabilities too. And then on the other hand, there's another species of life. They're called the Diaboli because they've got these sort of horn-like things that kind of, and maybe big yellow slit eyes that make them look kind of sinister, but it's just how they look. They're just animate creatures like anything else. They actually have a surprisingly large amount in common with the creatures in the story Hostess that we just saw a couple stories ago. They walk on 4 legs. They have another pair of front arms that are kind of like hands, sort of. They can't sit down in any meaningful sense of the word. They're vegetarians. They're like cows. And where the creatures in Hostess would chew side to side, these creatures chew almost that. They chew kind of in a circular motion like this. As they chew their cud. And it's a cud. They like bovine animals. And I think that too is in the other. So they have a lot, and they also have certain chemistry needs or something. They carry little canisters with them to provide the right air. Only it isn't cyanide, it's a different chemistry. They're more sulfur based. Well, of course, how appropriate. Not only have horns and slitty eyes, but also have a smell of sulfur dioxide. Yes. A sweet smell of rotten eggs and other less glamorous emissions. So, at any rate, these Diaboli, oh gosh, what do you call them? Let's see here. We call them, there's a nice little squib here. H.G. Wells used science fiction literary devices, space and time travel in particular, to propound a historian's philosophical views on sociology and government. The solution of human conflicts undoubtedly lies somewhere within the corpus of political science texts, as it does within the scriptures. Apply the right formula, the proper balance of thought, and rule from each, and you have peace. But finding the formula is another matter, and the best-intentioned thinkers often martyr themselves to no avail. In a story with a superb and startling twist, Dr. Asimov here reverses the H.G. Wells pattern. He is a scientist by profession who thinks like a philosopher and writes like a thinker. In this penetrating study of the philosophy of revolution, Asimov has conceived a wonderfully ironical plot and produced one of the truly fine stories of his career. Let's see, where do we meet these beings? The Diaboli. Okay. So they're called the Diaboli. Diaboli, seem to have a unified government. Some one or another of them is in charge of them all, and everybody just accepts that. So you don't have all these different political and other divisions that humanity seems to be inevitably stuck with. You don't have, like in your ancient Greeks, you had your Athens, your Sparta, your Thebes, your Rhodes, your all these different little towns that each had their own ways of doing everything that just didn't mesh with everybody else's. You had just a single unified government, totally consistent within itself, totally used to doing everything straightforwardly and without a lot of side discussion. and they are spreading like wildfire throughout the galaxy. Now, they inhabit their own very different planets from the ones the humans inhabit. Theoretically, they should have been able to coexist peacefully by we just take our planets, they just take their kind of planets, and never the twain shall meet, really, other than in spaceships in space once in a blue moon, I suppose. But somehow they've developed a bit of an attitude, or there's a concern about them. See, now the hero of this story, or at least the nominal hero, there are two heroes of this story. One who is kind of the revolutionary martyr type, and his name is Richard or Dick Sayama Altmaier. We call him Dick all the time. So, or Altmaier. That's the one guy. He's our revolutionary guy. He wants to create a human federation and so forth and unite humanity to take on this Diaboli. And going against him is another, I guess, school chum named Jeffrey Stock, who seems to take precisely the opposite standpoint. And Jeffrey even ends up arranging 3 different times to having Dick Altmaier arrested for his political, attempts. At one point, Dick tries to unite humanity by assassinating some of these Diaboli who are actually meeting on the planet Earth. And Jeff manages to trick him by having robot simulations of the Diaboli walking across the courtyard where Dick and his associates are in conspiracy are ready to shoot them dead. And they end up shooting a bunch of robots. They're duly humiliated. So Jeff is kind of, just seems like this establishment thing who just doesn't seem to understand or care that if we don't unite against the Diaboli, they will, and in fact, as the story goes on, they do, start shutting off much of space to human travel. So we need to do something about that. We can't allow that. But what is to be done? How do we stop that? So, in order to stop that, humanity needs to be united. But maybe there's a reason that it doesn't have to be united in order to be the best possible warriors. And I'll just leave it at that, as anything more than that would be a spoiler. So, it's an interesting story. It's like history remembers something one way. The martyr gets remembered as the hero in a good cause. Failure is only means a delay or something like that. But at any rate, in a good cause. Well, yeah, maybe. Sometimes we all hope. So, it's been a fun little story. And reading that there, and this story also is contained in Nightfall and Other Stories. So, and once again, there was one very tiny difference. For some strange reason, and I'll find the original in here because it's kind of an odd in good cause. Let's see, maybe it says at the very end, and I can open that directly. Let's see here. In good cause, there are no failures, only deferred success or something like that. So I still didn't have the whole thing. Okay. Alright, near the beginning. There are the dates of these. The name on the pedestal reads Richard Sayama Altmaier. Underneath it is a short phrase and vertically arranged 3 dates. The phrase is, in a good cause, there are no failures. The 3 dates are June 17, 2755, September 5, 2788, December 21, 3000. The years being counted in the usual manner of the period, that is, from the date of the first atomic explosion in 1944 of the ancient era. 1944. Oops. Well, for the re-release in the other story, it becomes 1945, because that's when the first 3 atomic bombs were detonated, first in New Mexico as a test, then, of course, the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It ended World War II, pretty much. So, there you go. Anyway, that kind of talks about the story. I've kind of enjoyed it. Apparently, Asimov himself comments on this a little bit when including it in this collection. And he kind of has some thoughts that I think are worth pointing out. Okay, in 1951, Mr. Raymond J. Healy, an anthologist of note, I never heard of him, was planning a collection of original science fiction stories and asked me to write one. He made only one specification. He wanted an upbeat story, something which, in my own more unsophisticated way, I call a happy ending story. So I wrote a happy ending, but since I always try to beat the rules out of the sheer bravado, I tried to write an unexpected happy ending. I guess he kind of succeeded at that. One in which the reader doesn't find out until the very end what the happy ending really is. It was only after I successfully, I think, managed this particular tour de force that had the story published that I realized that my interest in technique had for once blinded me to content. Somehow, this particular story, in a good cause, doesn't quite reflect my own feelings. Rolf Conklin, the late perceptive science fiction critic, once said that he liked the story even though he disagreed with its philosophy, and to my embarrassment, I find that is exactly how I myself feel. So, it's kind of interesting. So, anyway, it's an interesting story all the same, and I think enjoyable. The twist is a nice surprise, and all in all, I guess just kind of end on a happy note. So, with that, thanks for listening.